Welcome to a deep dive into the world of Kabbalah. Sounds like you're really looking for ways to actually use it, not just the ideas behind it. Am I right?
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, we've got a great stack of your sources to help us with that. Lessons and diagrams from the philosophers of nature. And also, we've got Kabbalah, the Philosophers of Nature, Volume 2 by Jean Dubuis. So we'll make sure to cover the basics, but also, dig into those practical techniques and rituals that you're interested in.
Yeah, I'm excited to explore that applied side of Kabbalah.
Yeah.
It seems like so often these concepts are only theoretical, but your sources really emphasize, putting it into practice.
Yeah, exactly. But before we get into building pentagrams or summoning cosmic energies, let's lay some groundwork first. The philosophers of nature are a key part of understanding your sources.
Right.
They were actually founded by Jean Dubuis, he's kind of a fascinating guy.
He is. He was a physicist, and get this, an American living in France. And he didn't start exploring esoteric studies until he was 76. Talk about a late bloomer.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called Fundamentals of Esoteric Knowledge, which is considered essential for understanding Kabbalah, particularly, as a foundation for more advanced practices like alchemy.
Yeah, Dubuis saw a real connection between those disciplines,
Mhm.
which is why he created the philosophers of nature to teach both. In fact, Kabbalah was actually a prerequisite for their alchemy courses, which shows how important he thought it was.
Interesting. So these lessons that we have today, the source material, they were originally sent out monthly to students. It was all about making these complex teachings very practical and accessible.
Right, learning by doing.
Yeah.
It's a very hands-on approach, which totally aligns with what you're looking for. It's not just about understanding Kabbalah intellectually, but experiencing it, right?
Exactly. Okay, so let's get into the good stuff. You mentioned that you're interested in how to actually apply Kabbalah in your life. So to do that, we need to understand this framework that it all operates within. Your sources talk about these four worlds, almost like levels of reality. Do those ring a bell?
Yes. The four worlds are a very important concept. You've got Etzeluth, the most divine realm, pure, and then it kind of steps down in terms of levels of manifestation to Braya, Yetzirah, and then finally Asaya, which is like the physical world that we're experiencing right now with our five senses.
So it's like a cosmic ladder, right?
Yeah.
Going from pure spirit all the way down to the material world. And the tree of life, which we see depicted in a lot of your sources, is like the roadmap to navigate these worlds.
Exactly, yeah. The tree of life is a visual representation of the structure of the universe and the path of spiritual evolution. So you can think of it kind of like a tree with its roots in the divine and the branches reaching down into the physical world. Each part of the tree represents different aspects of existence, and then the 10 Sephirot on the tree of life are kind of like energetic hubs.
Now, are you familiar with Sephirot at all? Okay, cool, because they can be kind of a tricky concept. They're these emanations of divine energy, each with their own qualities and archetypes. They're not just, abstract ideas. They're forces that actually influence everything.
Yeah, and the tree of life shows us how those forces kind of flow from the source through each of Sephirah and then into those four worlds that we talked about. It's really powerful imagery for understanding how everything is interconnected.
I know, it makes me wonder, how did they figure all this out, right?
It's amazing.
So speaking of intricate connections, one of your sources talks about four levels of consciousness: Chia, Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh. It can feel kind of overwhelming just trying to, keep those straight in your head.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Like trying to map the inner landscape of our being, right?
Yeah.
But of those four levels, the one that people are often drawn to is Ruach. Have you ever had like a really strong gut feeling that turned out to be true? That might be Ruach.
Interesting. So because Ruach kind of acts like a bridge between those higher spiritual realms and our physical existence, so it's like our intuition is tapping into a deeper wisdom or something like that.
Exactly. And what's even more interesting is that Ruach has this dual nature.
Mhm.
It encompasses both our highest aspirations, A and D, also our more base desires. That's why we sometimes feel that internal tug of war,
Yeah.
between what we know we should do and what we really want to do.
Right. It's like that angel and devil on our shoulders, but they're part of the same force. And get this, there's a connection between Ruach and 7 palaces in the head. Each palace supposedly receives a different Sephirotic influence and forms the basis for spiritual consciousness. So what do you make of that?
Well, we're not talking about literal palaces, of course. More like energetic centers that correspond to different aspects of consciousness. Think of them as, doorways to different levels of awareness and perception.
So it's saying that the way we think and experience the world is actually shaped by these energetic influences. And that by, working with those energies, we can actually change our consciousness.
That's the basic idea behind a lot of Kabbalistic practices. And that brings us to another point that I know you were interested in, the practical rituals.
Mm-hmm.
Your sources really delve into the rituals of the pentagram and the hexagram.
Yeah, it's like, okay, enough theory. Let's actually do something. What's the point of these rituals? Like, what can someone actually hope to accomplish by performing them?
They're not just symbolic gestures. They're tools for actively engaging with and influencing spiritual and psychic energies. It's kind of like putting psychic structures and currents back in order, as one of the lessons said.
Hold on, I gotta write that down. Psychic structures and currents back in order. Okay, so how do they actually work? What are they all about?
Well, they involve specific actions, visualizations, and the use of symbols and sounds. They're designed to resonate with different energies, almost like tuning forks. And they can be used for a lot of different purposes, like protection or purification or invoking specific qualities. You can even use them to communicate with higher beings.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Your source material goes into a lot of detail about constructing and using the greater pentagram. It mentions using black fabric, wooden plugs, attaching symbols and colors. It's really specific.
And there's a reason for all that detail. It's not just for looks. Each element has a symbolic meaning and an energetic correspondence. When you combine them in the right way, you're creating a really powerful energetic circuit.
I'm looking at this diagram right now, and it really does look like a blueprint for something pretty potent. I'm curious, what's the reasoning behind using those specific materials, like the black fabric, wooden plugs, and stuff like that? It's like building some kind of mystical device.
It is a kind of device, in a way. It's a tool for focusing and directing subtle energies. For example, black fabric might represent the void, the primordial state from which all creation emerges. And the wooden plugs could symbolize grounding, connecting the energy of the ritual to the physical world.
So it's like a mystical art project combined with a carefully choreographed dance. There's even this whole concept of using an astrological dial as part of the preparation. It's like Kabbalah meets astronomy.
That's one of the things I find so fascinating about Kabbalah. It weaves together all these different strands of knowledge. The astrological dial helps to align the ritual with planetary energies at that particular moment, so you can kind of harness their power.
So, okay, say we've built our pentagram and we've checked the astrological dial and we're ready to perform the ritual. What happens next?
Well, the ritual itself involves a series of actions, visualizations, and vibrating divine names in Hebrew letters. The sources really emphasize the importance of being precise and focused in each step.
It even mentions cultivating a specific mental attitude beforehand, like humility and obedience to the great king, and having a mind free from distractions. It's like Kabbalah saying, check your ego at the door.
Exactly. The rituals aren't about personal power or trying to manipulate the universe. They're about aligning yourself with a higher power and surrendering to a greater will.
So far, we've talked mostly about the pentagram rituals, but you also provided some material on the hexagram rituals, too. How are they different?
The hexagram rituals are specifically designed to work with planetary energies. So instead of a 5-pointed star, you're drawing a 6-pointed star and invoking the powers of a particular planet. For example, maybe you'd invoke Mars for courage or Venus for love.
Oh, and there are rituals for both invoking and banishing those energies, too? It makes sense, though, because you don't want to invite something in that you can't control, right? It's like Kabbalah saying, be careful what you wish for.
Exactly. It's an important point. These are powerful techniques, and it's super important to approach them with respect and understanding. It's not about getting what you want, but more about aligning with the natural flow of energies for the benefit of you and the universe as a whole.
This whole concept of working with energies reminds me of something else we talked about earlier. Those 4 levels of consciousness, specifically Ruach. Do you think the rituals can help us strengthen that connection to our intuition, to that higher wisdom within?
Absolutely. The rituals can act as a kind of training ground for Ruach, helping us develop sensitivity to those subtle energies and how to direct them. Kind of like working out a muscle, but in this case, it's the muscle of our spiritual perception.
This is fascinating. But before we go too deep down the ritual rabbit hole, let's connect this back to the Tree of Life. Remember those 32 paths we were talking about before? Each one represents a stage of spiritual development, and they're all interconnected.
Right, yeah. It's like a map for the journey of the soul. As we progress along our spiritual path, we move through these different stages, and we face challenges and learn lessons.
And each path is actually associated with a Hebrew letter. And each letter carries its own profound symbolism and meaning, almost like a secret language that's just waiting to be decoded.
Imagine each letter as a key that unlocks a deeper understanding of the universe. The more keys you gather, the more doors you can open.
Now, your sources go into some specifics about what some of those paths represent, like Path 32, which connects the physical world to the astral world. It's all about mastering the four elements.
Grounding yourself in the physical while developing your spiritual awareness. Very much like what we were talking about with the rituals, finding that balance between material and spiritual.
And then there's Path 31, Judgment, which is about confronting your past actions and preparing for a new cycle. Sounds pretty intense.
It can be, but also really liberating. It's about taking responsibility for your choices and using that awareness to move forward with more purpose and clarity.
Then there's Path 28, the Star, which represents hope and inspiration and the integration of our higher and lower selves. That one sounds a bit more uplifting.
It is. Recognizing your potential, finding the strength and guidance to pursue it.
But it's not always easy, is it? Path 27, the Tower, sounds like it could represent some rough times.
The Tower is often associated with upheaval. A lot of disruption. It can be a chaotic time, destructive even, but ultimately it's about breaking free from limiting beliefs and outdated structures.
Like a cosmic shakeup to clear out the cobwebs and make space for something new. What about Path 26, the Devil? That one sounds kind of, well, daunting.
The devil is often misunderstood. It's not about evil in the traditional sense. It's more about confronting our shadow side, the aspects of ourselves that we might try to hide.
So acknowledging our own duality.
Exactly.
Integrating the light and the dark within.
It's about wholeness, not perfection.
Right. A couple of other paths that stood out to me were Temperance, which is about finding balance and moving towards spiritual liberation, and then also the Hermit, which seems to emphasize solitude and introspection.
Those are both crucial parts of the spiritual journey. Temperance teaches moderation and finding harmony. And then, yeah, the Hermit reminds us that sometimes we need to step back from the world, connect with our inner wisdom.
Wow, so we've got these 32 paths representing stages of spiritual growth. Each path is associated with a Hebrew letter that holds even deeper meaning. It feels like this deep dive could go on forever.
It could, but that's the beauty of Kabbalah. It's a lifelong journey of discovery.
Speaking of exploration, one of your lessons mentioned using dreams to understand our position on the Tree of Life. It even describes specific castles associated with different Sephirot that we might encounter in our dreams. Have you ever thought about dreams in this way?
It's a really cool concept. Like, our dreams aren't just random images, but symbolic messages from our subconscious, or even higher realms.
The lesson mentions this bright castle of Braya, which represents the world of creation and intuition. Then there's the comfortable abode of Gibra, symbolizing strength and discipline.
And there's the religious building in Cheesed, representing love and compassion. And the mysterious castle of Hod, which is connected to the Sephirah of intellect and communication.
Do any of those resonate with you? Have you ever had any experiences in your dreams that seem similar to any of those?
It's definitely given me a lot to think about when it comes to dream interpretation.
Right. So let's get back to those practical rituals, because we were just starting to uncover how they work and what they can do for us.
Yeah, we were talking about how they can be seen as tools for influencing those spiritual and psychic energies. Almost like, recalibrating our internal circuitry.
And the source material really goes deep into the instructions for both the pentagram and hexagram rituals. Diagrams, material lists, symbolic correspondences. It's like a Kabbalistic workshop manual.
It really is. That attention to detail emphasizes how important precision and intention are in these practices. Every single element, like the materials, the specific words, the gestures, it's all carefully chosen to align with and influence particular energies.
For example, the Greater Pentagram ritual specifies using a piece of plywood covered in black fabric, with wooden plugs inserted at specific points. And then there's the attaching of symbols, sounds, and colors corresponding to the elements, planets, and zodiac signs. It sounds pretty elaborate.
It is, which is why preparation and understanding the symbolism is so important. The Greater Pentagram is a powerful tool for invoking and directing those spiritual forces, so you want to be sure you're doing it correctly.
I'm really struck by how specific the instructions are. I mean, black fabric, wooden plugs, so detailed. What do you think the reasoning is behind choosing those specific materials? It feels like every element is there for a reason.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about aesthetics. It's about creating the right conditions energetically for the ritual. Black fabric, for instance, might symbolize the void, that primordial state of potentiality from which all creation emerges. And the wooden plugs, those could represent grounding, connecting the energy of the ritual to the physical world.
So it's almost like building this sacred space, a container
Uh,
an energetic container for the ritual. And then on top of that, you've got the astrological dial, which adds yet another layer of precision and intentionality.
yeah, the astrological dial is really fascinating. It's used to figure out the most auspicious time for the ritual, aligning it with the planetary energies at that specific moment.
Sure.
It's like fine-tuning the frequency of the ritual to resonate with those cosmic forces.
Okay, so let's say we've done all that prep work, built our pentagram, consulted our astrological dial, and we're ready to perform the ritual. What happens next?
Well, the ritual involves a sequence of really specific movements, visualizations, and vibrating divine names in Hebrew letters. The source material really goes step by step and emphasizes the importance of being accurate and focused.
It even talks about the mental and emotional state you need to be in before you even start. Things like humility, obedience to a higher power, and having a clear and focused mind. It's like Kabbalah is saying, leave your ego and distractions at the door.
Exactly. These rituals are not about personal gain or manipulating the universe to get what we want. They're about aligning ourselves with a higher power, submitting to a greater will.
It sounds incredibly powerful, but also like something that requires a lot of responsibility and self-awareness. Speaking of responsibility, we haven't really talked much about invoking versus banishing energies. There are rituals for both, right?
Yeah, and that's a really important distinction. Invoking is about calling in specific energies or qualities. Banishing is about removing or repelling unwanted influences. It's important to be really clear about your intention and proceed with caution, because these energies can be very potent.
It's almost like opening a door to the unseen world, right? And you want to make sure you're inviting the right guests. So far, we've mostly talked about the pentagram rituals, but you also provided some materials on the hexagram rituals too. So how do those differ?
The hexagram rituals are specifically designed to work with planetary energies. So instead of a 5-pointed star, you're drawing a 6-pointed star, invoking the powers that are associated with each planet. For example, you might invoke Mars for courage and strength, or Venus for love and harmony.
So if I was looking to boost my creativity, I might do a hexagram ritual invoking Mercury because it's associated with communication and intellect.
Exactly. And if you're feeling overwhelmed by negativity, maybe you do a banishing ritual focused on Saturn, because it's often associated with limitations and obstacles.
Wow, it's incredible to think that we have access to these tools, these powerful tools for working with subtle energies. It's like having a whole arsenal of spiritual techniques at our disposal.
It is. And, like any tool, the key is to use them wisely and to understand how they can affect us. Kabbalah gives us this incredible system for understanding and working with the universe, but we need to approach it with respect, humility, and a real desire for growth and transformation.
This has been an amazing journey through the world of Kabbalah. We covered so much, from those core principles and symbolism to the practical techniques and rituals. I'm feeling really inspired, and I kind of feel humbled by how deep and complex this tradition really is. It's definitely something that I want to keep exploring.
And remember, the journey is the most important part. Kabbalah is not about getting to some final destination, but more about that continuous process of self-discovery and spiritual evolution.
So to all of you listening out there, we really encourage you to keep digging into the source material, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep experimenting, keep experiencing Kabbalah for yourselves. You might be surprised by what you find within.
And you never know, you might even encounter some of those dream castles on the way. Pay attention to those symbols, those messages that come through your dreams, and see where they lead you on your own unique Kabbalistic path.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those Kabbalistic wheels turning.